Well, good evening. Thank you so much for being here on East Texas Now. There's a lot of things coming out of Washington that we'd like to get your take on, see if you have some little nuggets to be able to give us, if that's all right with you, sir.
Yeah, have at it.
All right, sounds great. So first and foremost, obviously, the biggest news, former President Trump's alleged hush money payment. The grand jury, they didn't meet today. So what does that mean for any future potential indictment? And is that something that we're going to get to know ahead of time, or are we going to know after the fact?
Yeah, Devin, what it basically means is that we're just going to have to wait another day, and so will the former president. We do know that the grand jury is scheduled to meet tomorrow, and it's possible that Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg may want more witness testimony before he ultimately calls for a vote of the grand jury as to whether to indict or not. Now, in order to secure an indictment, it would take a majority of the 23 grand jurors to ultimately vote to indict. And ultimately, if there was an indictment that did come down, Trump would likely surrender, but then he would go through the process just like any other criminal defendant. He would be fingerprinted, he would get a mugshot, and then his lawyers and prosecutors would negotiate when his first initial court appearance would happen. Now, as far as when things are going to happen, that remains unclear, and the district attorney's office has really played this close to the vest. They're not talking to the press whatsoever, and so we're basically going to find out when the rest of the world finds out.
Makes sense. We will continue to keep a close eye on the updates from there. Now, another thing that we streamed here on East Texas Now was the Federal Reserve. They raised interest rates yet again. So what can you tell us? Did this meet expectations? Is the 0.25 raise what we were expecting, or was that a bit of a surprise?
No, it was exactly what people were expecting, that quarter-point hike. And basically, the Fed did this for two different reasons, and two conflicting reasons at that. First of all, you're talking about inflation. Inflation right now is at 6%. That is lower than the 9.1%, which is the record high, but it's still too high. And the Fed wants to get that number down to 2%. And so ultimately, that's why they decided to raise rates today. Also, the banking failures that just recently happened with Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. And President Biden and his administration stepped in to protect depositors from those two banks failing. But ultimately, it was those two reasons why the Fed did something about it. Fed Chair Jerome Powell said that this is all about consumer confidence. And he said that's one of the main reasons why they did this today. But he did say that as far as rate hikes are concerned, they would likely come to an end by the end of the year. And the White House is more than happy with that. Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary, said today that, look, the Federal Reserve is independent of what we do, and whatever they decide to do, they should be given the space to do it.
Let's head now to Ohio. So the Senate Commerce Committee held a hearing on rail safety and the East Palestine, Ohio train derailment. Can you give us some of the highlights out of that hearing?
Yeah, so Norfolk Southern CEO Alan Shaw testifying in front of the Senate for the second straight time, and he basically repeated his pledge that Norfolk Southern will not leave East Palestine until they make things right. Those are his words. He also talked about how the company has helped residents pay medical bills, deal with a loss in their property values, and he also talked about how there will be long-term water testing. But at the same time, Shaw did not endorse new bipartisan legislation in its fullest that has to do with what's called the Railway Safety Act. And this bill would increase fines for safety violations, mandate two-man crews on trains, and enhanced training for first responders. Shaw was on board with two of the three of those things. He says he's not on board with the two-man trains because he says that there's no data to suggest that adding another crew member would increase safety. With that said, the Ohio senators, Democrat Sherrod Brown and Republican J.D. Vance, they're the ones pushing this legislation, and they believe that Shaw ultimately will get behind things, but right now they are demanding a lot of accountability from Shaw and his company.
Again, something we will continue to look for future updates on to see what actually is implemented. In the meantime, I know looking ahead to tomorrow, TikTok's CEO is going to be testifying before a House committee. So what can we expect from that testimony?
So the CEO, Shou Chu, will appear in front of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. And basically what he's going to argue is that ByteDance, which is the company that owns TikTok, it's not an agent for the Chinese government. And he's going to try to argue this is because TikTok obviously is very vulnerable right now to potentially being banned in the United States, which is something they don't want. And 150 million Americans likely wouldn't want either, because that's the amount of Americans that use this app every single month. With that said, there are a bipartisan group of lawmakers that are sold that TikTok is a national security threat. And there's been bipartisan legislation that's been introduced in the Senate to give the president a very easy roadmap to ultimately ban the app. And also, you had the FBI director, Chris Wray, tell the Senate Intelligence Committee earlier this month that if Beijing wants to take control of this app, it can. And so the CEO of TikTok is going to have an uphill battle tomorrow because, quite frankly, lawmakers are sold that TikTok does not do anything but spy on Americans.
Well, we will continue to keep an eye out for TikTok's future in America. Josh, I want to thank you for being on East Texas Now, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Once again, that is East Texas Now's Washington correspondent Josh Rultenberg giving us the latest out of Washington. We were talking TikTok, we're talking East Palestine, Ohio, we're talking former President Trump and a pending possible indictment, all things that we're going to continue to keep our